Please be seated. Seats are always weird. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure as the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Built Environment and Information Technology, Wynand Steyn, to welcome all of you to this event tonight, but specific welcome to our Vice Principal Student Life, Professor Themba Mosia, to the Deputy Minister of the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, Mr. Mondli Gungubele, to the Vice Chancellor of the Tshwane University of Technology, Prof. Tinyeku Maluleke, the Deputy Director General of the National Department of Basic Education, Dr. Naledi Mbudi Mehana, members of the UP Executive, our speaker of this evening, very importantly, Prof. Vukosi Marivate, deans and deputy deans, heads of departments, colleagues, all of our colleagues from other departments also and other faculties. It's always good to have you here. Then also very importantly, the family of Prof. Marivate. It's always good to share in this occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Our inaugural lectures is a milestone in any of the academic staff's life as a academic person starting from a first degree and working up towards full professorship. So we appreciate your attendance at this occasion tonight. The title of tonight's inaugural lecture by Professor Vukosi Marivate is Beyond the Symbols, Natural Language Processing as an Adaptive Problem. And I'm pleased to ask Prof. Mosia to formally open this occasion and welcome all of us. Thank you, Prof.
You see us struggling the stairs. That's when you are a senior citizen. Sorry, I'm a retiree, so it's understandable. Not these young fellows who can't climb the stairs. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. And you are heartily welcome at this great University of Pretoria. And I'm going to also do some special welcome. We have many, many guests here, many dignitaries. It's a very long list, and I'll not be able to finish it in the interest of time. But they're all heartily welcome here. But I would like to have a special word of welcome to Professor Marivate himself, and his wife, Tembegile, who she says to the husband, she didn't say to me, what are we doing for us in the bed? To remind him that language works in a collective responsibility. So he has many role players in his work. And his parents, Ongal and Pula King, who taught him that to whom much is given, much is expected. And he does delivering on that mandate. The Dean of the Faculty, Professor Steyn, and deputies, Professor James Maina and Professor Alto Fernandes. I saw them here. Deputy Minister, Minister Gungubele, truly welcome to your university. And this is a home, as you know. And welcome to Dr. Naledi Botemahana as well, the DDG. As the Dean said, you are also a very special guest to us tonight. And Professor Tinye Kumaluleke, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Technology, he decided to come back home. Welcome. Welcome, Timiko. He's coming back here. This duty is just a peace job. And of course, managers of the private sector and partnerships and everyone else involved from other universities, senior people there, Ds, deputies, everyone, heads of departments in the Habit faculty. I know if I don't welcome you, I'll be in trouble because you're the people that make us look good. And friends and mentors, mentees, students, everyone who has joined Professor Marivate in this exciting journey for quite some time now. And he is grown now, and we can see him. I know him since he was little, actually. And it makes me very proud to introduce him. You know, at this university, when I speak of him and I speak of Professor of nuclear medicine, Mike Sateche, who are also in universities, so little, and I see the work that they do, you know, and I'm truly proud of the work that they do. And again, we thank you all for offering up your time. We're usually cutting to the chase here and finish with the introductions so that we can hear the main speaker. And I want to make a bit of an exception tonight because it's Professor Marivate. You know, he is really special to us as a young academic and going through all the platforms and his training by Professor Chilitse Marwala, who is known to all of us, and of course, Professor Mike Lipman. They have really done the work of supervising him through master's and doctoral studies. And we thank them in their absence. And we also want to share with you a bit of his background. He studied electrical engineering at the University of the Witwatersrand, and he earned his master's in May 2009. Then he joined Rutgers State University in New Jersey, the firelit place in 2010, graduating with a PhD in computer science. And he joined the CSIR, doing all kinds of things there, different roles, as a senior researcher, a team researcher, group leader, data science. And then he joined us, and also as a professor in computer science and UP chair for data science in 2018. So he has done tremendous work about language, natural language processing, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And he serves as course coordinator in all other forums, including the work that he does through Enterprise UP to spread this learning into this field. His many postgraduate students, PhD candidates, and he has secured competitive research grants. I don't know money. The recent one I saw, you know, as we're looking things here, he's got us 18 million donation from Google, $1 million. And we're truly appreciative of that for his African Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence to take work that has been cut out for it. It has multiple foci. I will not go through them, but just to say that these many grants that he has received over the years as a young leader is what distinguishes him. And we know that he has made a huge presence globally. He has been doing other work at Harvard Business School and so on and so forth and others. And he is the World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and two-time NSTF Award finalist and a Futures Professors Program. So ladies and gentlemen, there are many things that I can say about Professor Marivate, many. And I will limit them because I'm sure we're all anxious to hear what he says. He does a lot of community work. From time to time, he's in the aircraft somewhere in Africa, and I just see his postings on LinkedIn and everywhere else. Well, LinkedIn is what I read. These are the things I don't know what they are. So, but I see the work there, but we closely keep in touch with what he does and encourage him and support him with the work that he does in his research, because we are a research-intensive university and we stand out. And this faculty as well, we continue to stand out in many ways. And he is among a community of scholars, he's among students who are challenging and engaging, and I'm sure that even his hobby, which is an amateur runner, and his goal is to run with his 4-year-old twins, his daughters, for 5 kilometers. Because he says before they come too big to ride, all these strollers, they must run. But 12 kilometers. Professor. As you can see, he's got super daughters. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, I want us to go into the business of the day. We had a topic, and it's pretty much what he will share with us about symbols. And I want to give him the platform now because, as an elderly man, and while data science and AI confound me as an elderly son of the soil, I'm quite excited to hear what Prof. Marivate has to share with us this evening. And I'm sure that his lecture promises to be quite riveting. Let us listen to him. And I've seen him in action. I'm sure others will very well. Prof. Marivate, this is your floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. All right. Thank you, and good evening, everybody. And thank you for that introduction as well. Okay, let's see. Okay. Today's inaugural lecture I do dedicate in memory of Dr. Carol Nonkwelo, who was a servant here at the university and somebody who also believed in our mission and vision in working towards AI on the continent. You're somebody who really supported not just myself, but also many, many scholars at the university and at our research group as well. I run the Data Science for Social Impact Research Group, where about now 90% of the work that we're doing is at the intersection of artificial intelligence and African languages, and the rest is actually touching on data science and society. So how do we make sure that these systems or these innovations get into the hands of people? So today I want to talk about beyond the symbols, that words are not just these symbols, but they represent more, and to really get them to be represented, there's way more that we need to do in these spaces. So first, let's set the foundations. Okay, so what is machine learning? You hear it all the time, all this AI. So in machine learning, it's just a subset of AI where machine learns a pattern from data. So let's say I give you those two dots of data. One is red and then one is blue. I ask you, if I was to drop a new dot on the surface, what color would it be? The simplest thing to learn is a decision boundary, a line that sits equidistant between the two data points, and anything that falls left of that line in the future, you say it's red, and anything that falls on the right, you say it's blue. Sure, this is an oversimplification of this. You can make it a little bit more complicated. That's our data now. And then what happens is that the decision boundary, that the thing that you have to learn becomes more complicated. And instead of y is equals to mx plus c, you're going to likely have a quadratic function in this space. So now, this is oversimplification, but really, if we skip 1 year of an AI class, now we're here. Let's actually all learn about a mass language model. All right, what is this? So now the input that we're going to have is a sentence. And then what you're going to do is you want to get the machine to learn how to predict what the missing word is. So you take a word and you put this word at the output, and you now say, I'm going to give you the cat is empty some food. And now the machine should learn the pattern of identifying what the missing word is supposed to be. We all know this. This is autocomplete, predictive text that you use on your thing. So all of this you can learn. It's just that you need a lot of data to actually do this. So you take like Wikipedia, and then you train a model that does this. There's other things, again, we'll skip a semester of another one of natural language processing. And now what we get to is there are other things that have gone on. You get to your large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, all those things. But what happens with our local languages? So here's an example. Count from 1 to 10 in isiZulu, one of our collaborators at Lelapa AI, who put this in, and it says Ku1, Ku2, Ku3, Ku4. Why is that, all right? Translate from isiZulu to English, Kuyabiza, Ukugibela, Ibanoi, and the response is, he insults by calling him a coward. And what that sentence is supposed to be, in terms of a translation, is expensive to go on an aeroplane. All right, so these are things that happen, and we need to understand why. African African languages are not well represented in these models. So here's some recent work called Afrobench by Jessica Ojo and collaborators. And what they show is that you can take a lot of the models on there and then try to estimate how well do they do in different tasks. So here, what you want to have is 100 is a perfect score. And then under 100, obviously, then you're not. But if you take all these more global models, these big models that come from very big companies, what are you getting? You're around, the 29s, the 40s, maybe with some of the big models that come from the big companies, you're 60. But if you build models from the ground up that are African focused, you get better. So there's these things that we need to think about when we think about our languages. And what tends to happen is that there's little or no support of African languages in actually these systems. So there's a lot of history. Again, we talk about AI and everybody tends to think about when ChatGPT came out in end of 2022, but the history of natural language processing goes back to the 1950s in earnest when you're thinking about computing. And you can see all of the progress that has gone on up to the point where you've got the neural machine translation, the systems that you can use online, whatever translate system that you have. But the problem is we're talking about English. Right? For our languages, this is still something that we have to work on and really try to improve. Now, let's then think about the state of our languages. How did we get to this point? So the one is that we then talk about low resource languages. What does it mean, low resource? You may have many speakers, but few tools, data, etc. How many people in the room have a dictionary, thesaurus, in your language, outside English or Afrikaans, on their phone, laptop, or desktop at home? At the moment, I only see 1, maybe 2 or 3. People are cheating on here because they're language specialists on this side. So they work on language and they have that. But then you can see, let's say in a room of 120 at the moment, that is a very small amount. So you can have languages that have literally have millions of speakers, but thinking about their development, we don't have the tools. on those areas. So to train, remember I showed you that thing of like you train a model to predict that next word. This is the basis of a lot of the current large language models. First, you have to train that. So initially, what they used was Wikipedia. Here's Wikipedia, and this is the size of Wikipedia per language. There's English. It's about 7 million articles that are written in English on Wikipedia. At the bottom is African Arabic, that has about 1.6. If we go down further, that's Swahili, so it's not sure. That's about 60,000. If you keep on going down, there's Yoruba, 33,000, isiZulu, 11,000, Sesotho, 949. So you can see where we've gone. So you can use this as a heuristic for all the great things that you see in a large language model in English. The amount of data that's available in Sesotho is magnitudes much smaller. So that's why partly explains the challenges that you see in these languages. At the same time, this is connected to our history, right? In many like African countries in South America and Asia, our languages were looked down upon as a consequence of colonialism. It is still something where you talk to people who are who tell you that no, even me, when I went to high school, and these are young people, I'm not talking about very old people, we were told not to speak our language, right, in 2025. Right, this is still a challenge that is there. So Ngugi Tiongo talks there and says, why not just move to the big, languages, these high resource languages? Well, language as communication is more than just the symbols. It's more than just the words themselves. It's culture, it's geography, it's knowledge that is captured inside there, and humanity will lose this. Right? If we don't actually actively work towards this. So now, what happens on the other side is that if you look at the science and the big work in this area where data comes in when you're evaluating, you find that most of the papers in natural language processing, 52% of them are evaluating on English. And this work done by the AI4D network from about 2 years ago shows that if you took all the African languages from 2 years ago and they looked at the benchmarks, it only made up 0.0199%. Right? So we have a challenge here. So my thesis is working on language is the same, especially on low resource languages, our languages, is akin to having a high interest credit card. So the more you wait to take care of the problem, the more expensive it becomes to actually pay down that debt. Right? So if you go to South Africa, you go back to like 1993, where our language policies came in, but then we don't implement them because we say, oh, it's too expensive. We have other things that we have to deal with in the country. So we keep on kicking that can down the road. Now we're 32 years later, and we still say next year. Right? Not now. Right? And it's an adaptive problem in that, yes, there are technical things that we have to resolve, but at the same time, people are the challenge and the solution. And you need to understand that you have to work in the area of being between that. And that's the thing that drives my transdisciplinary research, that you don't just work in the computer science department. So ultimately, in global AI, it tends to overlook African context, and then language is also a very important entry point towards equity and relevance of our technologies. So let me then talk about how do we then deal with this problem? So the recipe I'm going to talk about today in the work that we've been doing is going to be uncovering working with what we have, increasing our data, protecting our data, assembling armies, and also redefining our science. Lastly, making sure we move this mountain. And then how do we all get involved? So what do we do at Data Science for Social Impact? We do research, we build resources, we do policy development, and then we do these partnerships that cover, it's not just industry and academia, but then also governments and also globally within this space. So working with what we have. So some of our earlier work here looked at, can we artificially increase the amount of data that we have? And one of the challenges that you have, again, I asked you at the beginning, do you have thesauri or dictionaries? So what you can do is you take a sentence, you take a word and say, what is a synonym? Can I get that? We do not have those publicly for most of our languages. So how do you build this artificially? You can do that. So looking at work in embeddings in those spaces, and then from there, showing that you can actually improve performance. So even without that amount of a lot of data, you can find ways to tweak these. So this was work done with collaborators at CSIR. And then this ended up with a public software piece or library that people actually use, and I think right now it's almost 250,000 downloads since about 2019 when we finished this work. So people actively use this to increase the amount of data that they have. We joined a bigger collaboration across the globe that worked on building more of these types of tools of how do you augment or how do you artificially increase your data so that your systems are more robust, and that's also gone on and be published. The other one, I'm from Pretoria. So yes, we do not speak Setswana, we speak Sepitori. And as such, our language is mixed. So you don't have pure Setswana, right? Even though that will always be a thing that you have to go and argue and say, what is pure Setswana, right? Is it from some parts of the Northwest in South Africa or from Botswana? All right, then you might also have to think about Zambia or Zimbabwe, all those things. But some of the work that we've had to do then is how then do we build systems that better deal with what we call code switching and code mixing, where people, most of South Africa, especially if you're in a metropolitan area, you are mixing your languages. So the systems have to be able to process that as well. The other part is thinking then, let's say you're doing speech systems. Depending on who's speaking, so these systems where you speak and then they write down what you're saying, they also can be improved to better represent women, to better represent children. So the work here of Kathleen, my master's student, has been on looking at those social-linguistic identities and then exploiting them to build better systems in these areas. Because we don't have a lot of the data, you now need to focus your science on saying, how do I exploit this information that I know? The other ones have been going in and saying, okay, fine. Now we have multiple, like all of our data in all of these languages for all of our text. How then do we build up the systems that actually represents the word themselves? So we call these things embeddings. And there's a way that if you can do it well, one of the things that you get, I was saying like, okay, on this part, but the colors here represent different languages, and you will see that if you can embed your words in a good mathematical space, what happens is that even across multiple languages, you get that words that are closer to each other in this area are typically the same word translated in another language. Right, so you take the data that you can find, you clean it, you put it through these embeddings, you make sure that those embeddings are actually optimized, and then you can get to those things. And there's much, much more in being able to work on us dealing with the data as it is, right? We're not increasing our data, but then we're finding ways to actually better do that. So the other one then is how do we then expand the data that we have? So one is we must increase what benchmarks are there. So to train a large language model, you need a very large data set. The one that most of these companies typically use is a scrape of the internet, and it comes from this organization called Common Crawl. So Common Crawl was created to archive the internet, not to train large language models. So what I mean by archive the internet is just a historical basis of saying, here's what the internet was in 2024, here's what the internet was in 2023. So they were just going and they have these spiders that go around and download all that. But one of the things that you have as a challenge if you're doing that is that you don't want to store risky and unsafe things. So what they did is that they would filter or put safety filters to say, there's content, like unfortunately child sexual imagery, you don't want to keep on your databases. So you want to remove it as those spiders are going on. So, but to do that, you then will likely then want to only be able to identify that in whatever language, and it will tend to be in what? English. So the best thing to do is to first identify if the content is not in English. If it is not, you immediately remove it because you do not have safety filters for the other languages. And then if it is in English, you then apply your safety filters. So what this means is the data that a lot of these large language models, as they are trained, it starts off with very little of our data. So we would find, the reason like we were able to identify this, is we would say, no, but in this archive, there should be isiZulu, Setswana, Xitsonga content that we know because we know the websites. You go there, but it's not there. It was only when we started actually engaging with Common Crawl that we found out that there's all these filtering that they do. So now the work that's been done at the lab, led by Dr. Idris, our postdoc, is then on saying, can we now build better filtering or language identification for our languages, work with the Common Crawl team, and then from there, we can then build in new data that's available for people that covers our languages and could be useful for people to actually build their own language models within these spaces. Another project that we did is called Marito. In this project, what we were doing is identifying a terminology list or glossary. So the University of Pretoria, for example, has a multilingual glossary for students, so that as you're teaching, you can then go in Sepedi, in isiZulu, have concepts that are explained. But these tend to be in formats like PDF. PDF is great for humans to read, very bad for archiving for the future for machines. So what we did is we went around, especially identifying the resources that might have been actually funded by the government, and saying, how do we then get access to those? If you can do that, one of the things that you can do is now connect this to a language model or to an embedding model to test, because you have the same words in the same language across with some definitions. You can identify how good is my model in actually doing that translation between words. And you can also use this to actually add that glossary with your language model, that when you say, please translate from this to this, it uses that as a knowledge base, and it actually improves translation for our languages as well. The big project we've been working on for the last 2 years almost has been the Next Voices project. In this project, on the side of, again, you speak to your systems, you're trying in Seswati to talk to a phone, and it doesn't actually go and transcribe. So in this project, what we've been doing is working on collecting 3,000 hours of South African speech. So this has to be recorded and then transcribed and then put in high quality and then made available for other researchers and developers to build on top of this, on this thing. So it's literally taken 2 years. We are in the last 4 weeks of this project. We just released, I think yesterday was 500 hours of isiXhosa, and then we've got another 250 hours of isiZulu that will just become available hopefully in the next day or two. And then there's also already a 500 hours of Sesotho, and then more Indaba 250 hours is coming, which I think will be the largest data set in Indaba once it's out and all those things. So we're building these because then people can then build the systems of you can speak and then it writes down what is in the language. Again, you're trying because people mostly speak the languages. They don't try to write down technical concepts in those spaces. So this has been something that we've been working on, and we're very thankful for all the collaborators that have worked with us. It has been Herculean in putting this together. And the other news is that this project is part of a Pan-African project. There's 3,000 hours coming out of Kenya, with a number of languages there. There's 3,000 hours coming out of Nigeria. There's more, I think almost 10,000 hours coming out of Rwanda, more 3,000 hours that will come out of Ethiopia. So this is great. It's been a collaboration across the continent of us working together. And most of this, as I said, by end of September, this becomes available. So we're hoping that this makes a dent in the next year of what people are actually able to do. So if we have all of this, what can you do? And I wanted to show you this. So one is that we can actually then build our own language models, and it doesn't need to be large language models. So this project we worked on with the collaborators at Solplagi University in Hawaii, Africans who were there to say, can we build language models? So we remember that model I explained at the beginning, we train one of these for Setswana for 3 days on some GPUs here. And then what you can do now is have new features like doing name entity recognition in Setswana, where you'll identify things like, oh, Lefatshe la Zimbabwe is actually a place, right? Then these tools become available for everybody. Here's another one in parts of speech, where you can identify the parts of speech in the text. And we also, our models actually beat the other bigger models in these benchmarks. When you say, like, you can build it, it's very small. The PuoBERTa one is only 25 megabytes of Setswana. Remember I said, Common Crawl, so I didn't say this, is about 9 petabytes and mostly English. And now we're building in 25 megabytes, right, and on these small models. And we all then collaborated over the last year also with Nathan Brown from Clemson University, and then we built now a larger language model for Setswana called Pula that's also available for people to actually build on top of. Right, so, sorry, okay, my timing is almost there. Then we have to think about, okay, how do we protect this data? Right, we had to build up this data, but now the question comes in about our sovereignty and protection. So on one work by Prof. Chijoke Okori, who's somewhere in here, and Melissa Omino, Dr. Melissa Omino from SIPIT in Strathmore in Kenya, have been working on keeping the discussions about equitable licensing going. So the work they've done on the NOODL, so Nulute, about the open data license, is a license in such a way where we say, we will make our data available because we want innovators to build. But if you are from a developing country you can use this content, commercial, non-commercial. But if you're not from there, for non-commercial, you can still use it. But if you're working on commercial, how do you go back and say, how do the people who this data represents or the people who built it now think about benefits? Because one of the challenges that we have is that you can have the data, but we don't have the computing power to build these models. It takes a lot. Meta systems are about $1 billion. And we do not have the same type of thing. There's nowhere on the African continent where we actually have the same computing power that one company in the US has, like the whole African continent. So you need to think about how then you make this more accessible. So this work has been building up on that, and their paper got launched yesterday. So people can actually go read about that on why you need to address these power dynamics. At Lelapa, which is the company that I co-founded, and I work with my co-founders, we also have another license, the Esethu license. We want 1,000 flowers to bloom. And in this license, it looks at, say, no, not just developed countries, but then are you African or not African? Right? And then has a similar kind of structure with small changes here and there that people then have as options now as they build this data. Now we have to assemble the armies, right? So we've dealt with small amounts of data. We've tried to increase the data. We're protecting the data that we are actually creating. And now we have to think about who's going to use that data and actually build our joint futures. So for that, you need to assemble an army. So one has been working, co-founding the Masakhane Research Foundation in 2019. And there, what we do there is to say, how do we get to those billion kind of Africans? And it has been a distributed research lab that has 3,000 plus researchers who work on African languages, and most of them being on the African continent, but then also beyond. Right? And it's a grassroots organization, meaning people came together in 2019 and said, we are going to go and collaborate with each other. No walls, just work. And Masakhane has become this network of researchers who work with each other, encourage each other, mentor, and then build up as they go on. The first paper that was published, this participatory research paper, ended up winning the first Wikimedia Research Award from Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, for democratizing the internet. The Masakhane has gone on to become one of the most prolific research infrastructures in the world, right? Not just on the continent and building up and winning its own like awards, but something happened in 2024 and 2025, and I say what I said here of the story of African NLP is currently being written. So ACL, the Association of Computational Linguistics Conference, is one of the highest places to publish research scholarship work in natural language processing or computational linguistics. The Masakhane network won 4 best papers at this. So people who are connected to Masakhane or active researchers in Masakhane won 4 of the best paper awards there. And then this led, the Deputy Vice Chancellor alluded that we got funding from from Google. My bad, okay. Funding from Google for $1 million. In the same announcement, Masakhane got $3 million. Right, to start this Masakhane African natural language hub in those spaces. Here, I have to talk about something that I think is important. As I've been given this platform, I have to look back and make sure that the doors get wider for those who are still coming in this area. So we have to talk about incentives and metrics and how they affect our scholarship. So I talked about the story of Masakhane in this case, and I say people were publishing at this conference, which is one of the highest honors, you want to get your paper in there. But for most of this work, scientists who are based in organizations, countries, and continents where science might be measured primarily and narrowly by journal outputs, disconnected from the realities of actually the field itself, would have been discouraged from doing this work. They would have been told that, no, this is not the right thing. If you're publishing there, that's not the right place to be publishing. And we must do better in this case. Complex outputs, models, software, data, and more scientific outputs. I'm not saying there's one way. I'm saying there's many ways to recognize what is scientific excellence in this area. There's a paper that came out, I think last year, end of last year, called The State of South African AI. It's it's a study of looking at publications or sciometrics, I think, of which are the top AI producing university in the country. And what they did, I know you can see this, I'll say I'm sorry, all of these that they use as where they look for activity for AI are all journals. And in computing and in AI, journals are not the big place. It's actually a lot of conferences. And why does this happen? Especially in thinking about this in this perspective, is because of the way South African science is actually rewarded in some ways. DHET, on one side, has a subsidy model, and that subsidy model prioritizes journals over conferences, and it is not contextual at all. It discourages collaboration because whatever subsidy you get is also split by how many collaborators you have. You saw the Masakhane paper, 50 plus people. Right, so all of you will get it. If it's 50 Rand, all of you will get 1 Rand. Right, that is the reality. And it rewards quantity. In this case, people try to increase just the amount of things that come out on these things. So in that paper, it goes through and analyzes and says this. But I argue in this case is that, one, it's based because the argument of saying let's look at the journals is not based on the reality of the field. It's based on DHET is saying you must measure journals. Right, so already that's a problem. It misses research then in where natural language processing is happening, and it then has low activity. So it makes it look like people are not doing any work, but there's a lot of work in those cases, and it also then decentralizes and almost highlights of saying no, lower collaboration means you get more units. Right, so this is a major challenge that we face as scientists. Now, how do we get these tools into the hands of people? Right, and that's where for us, and if you are people who've been working in building these networks, we then said, okay, let's also start a company. We started Lelapa. Lelapa means home. We're gonna in Setswana, always saying people we want research to stay on the African continent and not leave and work in this area. So building resource-efficient AI from Africa to the world. So here we have, for example, our API called Vula that allows you to get access to multilingual speech systems. We have Inkuba LM, which was the first African large language model that was built here on the continent. And we also, as I said, we have the Esethu license, the Esethu framework that also tries to protect community data. Those services are being made available in those languages, and they're expanding. Right, we want to get to 500 million Africans very soon in this area. As I said, we launched Inkuba LM, and it was really something of, can we build a small language model that is performant? And then even after releasing this model, we had a competition earlier this year to even make it smaller. We have to find people where they are. The compute is not going to be something that we have, so how do we build better, smaller? All right? As I said, we moved the mountain, right? Because I have to prove to you that this has changed things on that one. So if we look at the study that looks at the growth of natural language processing, not all of AI, it looked about 734 papers over 2019 to 2024. What you see is growth across there. There's challenges about which languages, yes, are being covered, but this is more than what was there before. And you're getting to a point, if you look in the paper, where you started with only a couple, less than 50 papers in 2019 that were showing up at the big natural language processing venues. And now, as I said, we got to 4 best papers in one conference. All right, so that has been something that has been great. And you can see also the languages that are being represented there. So we also then have to guard against. So at the top there is Swahili, there's Hausa, there's Amharic, there's Yoruba, and Igbo and Esethu. Right? How do we increase this work? There's challenges that we have to still work on accents, right? On how the accents that come in, even in English, Portuguese, and French, the African accents are diverse in those areas. And there's still some work we're trying to look at, like, for example, Mozambique and Nigeria having some of the largest activity in these spaces. So how do we connect around those spaces? Now, I said we have to raise armies, right? So we moved that amount. So you still have to go beyond just language in these cases. And that's where the idea of the deep learning Indaba came in. So in 2016, really in earnest, we started thinking, a number of us had just finished our PhDs, we were engaging with each other and saying, how do you create an ecosystem on the African continent where you can drive AI forward? And the vision was, how do Africans become critical contributors, owners, and shapers, okay, 2016 saying, of the coming advances in AI. And to do that, we started the Indaba. The first meeting was in 2017 at the University of the Witwatersrand here in Johannesburg, with about 300 people gathered, about 600 people that applied to come. Initially, we had thought about something like 50 people coming to that meeting. Very quickly, as we started seeing people, the applications coming in, we remember going to the Vice Chancellor at that time, Prof. Adam Habib, and saying, can you allow us to increase these numbers as much as we can? And we got to 330. On that, because of having 600 people apply and only 300 spots, we then also engaged with creating an Indaba X system that one of my great collaborators, Prof. Benjamin Rossman, who's sitting here over here at the bottom, was in charge of inside the Indaba organization, where it started off, can we fund small work conferences across the African continent per country and then grow this? For us at the moment, we might hit this milestone. We're hoping to hit this by the end of the year, where we almost, over the last 2 years, we would have had 50 Indaba X's, so 50 African countries out of 54 having an Indaba X. All right, so there are 4 countries that we're still being targeted to get to, but that is continental reach, right? There's Pan-African by definition of saying people are having these workshops. The South African one this year was in Stellenbosch in May. And for the main gathering, the main Indaba, we just had it last week, so that's why my voice is still rough. The 2025 Indaba was in Kigali, in Rwanda. We had 1,294 registered participants. We had 3,000 applications to come for the gathering, 40% being women, almost 400 grants, because students do not pay, and we try to get the grants to fly from wherever on the continent they come from to come for this gathering. What does 1,294 people look like? Right, this is the premier AI venue on the continent, right? And we're still being built on there. And next year, we look forward to being in Nigeria for the first time. Right, for the main gathering. And this builds on a great tradition within artificial intelligence of the grassroots coming in, of saying, when you do not have the institutions, whether it's the private sector, the public sector, academia, that are pushing towards more diverse ecosystem in AI, what has happened is that the grassroots has come in. Really, for us, the pioneers were Data Science Africa in 2015, Deep Learning Indaba comes in 2017. Kipu there that you see is actually an Indaba spin-off that is in South America. Because the South American or Latin American community saw what the Indaba was doing in Africa and said, why don't we have our own one? And then they started Kipu, and even last week in Kigali, there was a number of people who came from that community to come see and say, how do we learn from what you're doing here on the continent? Masakhane is in there as 2019, and now if you're interested in climate, there's there. Sisonke that does with health. All of these are communities that are being incubated and building across there. What got us here won't got us there. We have seen great shifts over the last decade. Community, formalization of work, the impact of the work, rising seniority, these opportunities increasing, but mobility is still a challenge. Moving around the continent, if you want to go like a very interesting trip, try to go from Johannesburg to Sierra Leone. All right, you will do 4 hops in those spaces. It's challenging to get visas. Even people coming into South Africa or going, it's a challenge. We need to absorb the funding that's available. I still believe, and I still maintain my thesis, there's more money in African AI than Africa at the moment can actually absorb. We don't have the capacity to really do. We need to develop our academics, support them, choose the directions we want for ourselves, and then also increase the amount of local R&D. The challenge with the funding that is there is that most of it is coming from outside the continent. So get involved. What's next? For us, it has been building this new institute at the university. It's been great working on language, building that on. Our lab will continue, continue growing, but we want to look at AI and data science in a much broader way. So in this case, we started the African Institute for Data Science and AI. I'm the initial director. And in this case, it wants us to enable breakthroughs in data science and AI, solve complex problems on the African continent in a responsible, contextualized way, and imagine new African futures. I do want to acknowledge here the Future Professors Program that helped incubate, especially for the first 6 months of this year, all of the replanning, the strategies, and at the same time, also HBS. I was a Harvard South Africa Fellow in 2020, 2021, and actually building this institute was my case study 5 years ago. All right, so it is now getting to a point where we can actually, starting to put together, and now with the generous gift of 80 million rand to get it done. And we really want to fund African students, faculty, build this AI capacity because the talented ideas in Africa are constrained by access, mentorship, and institutional support. So we're hoping you will join us in this mission and make sure also that we're Pan-African in that we collaborate across the whole continent with other institutes as well as we build this. It is not a by the way, it has to be built in right from the beginning. The epilogue, in this case, at the end. Who am I? I take myself as a community organizer for AI across the continent. My personal mission is to make sure that as the AI revolution is happening, Africans have agency to choose the directions that they want, not to be told what they should be doing in those spaces. I'm a researcher. I sit on many boards of global organizations that have to do with AI, and also work to make sure that AI represents all of us. I am because we are. I'm here because of all the people that are in this room and beyond. And for me, it's something that we have to go in. You don't go with this alone. I remember, I know Suzanne who kept on going and saying feedback on my abstract and saying, but you must say you did X. And I was like, no, this is, I've just been a conduit to really build up all this research. I can't do it without all the people who collaborate with us. It is impossible. As I close, I want to give my deepest thanks to my family, my wife, who has walked this journey with me, asking a lot of questions on this, and knowing that also me trying to answer those questions, it means that I will then have to crisscross our country and our continent and beyond. To our twin girls, who are still small, but whom also we want to leave a legacy of culture, of language that they can take on and know that it's theirs. To my parents, who gave me a sense of purpose, and to my siblings, who continue to also inspire me in the things that they do. To my wider family, friends, collaborators, and to the African and global communities who have been so generous with their belief in our mission and what we do, thank you. This lecture cannot be just about my work, but about all of us finding a way to build together. May we keep widening the door so that many more can walk through for the future and build for something that we might not even be there, we will not be alive, but we know is worth building for. As I said, I'm very thankful for the collaborators that work with us across I cannot put enough of things. It's just the ones, I always remember one more and I go in and try to sneak it in those spaces, but we're also very thankful for all the support that we get from our funders and people who give us resources to do what we do. The nice thing about academic freedom is, yes, you might get funding from somebody, but you're also allowed to then say, critical things, because that's how we build science. In these spaces. So thank you, and thank you again.
Places of God.
Oh, yeah. So now it's my pleasure to say thank you, and normally to summarize it. And where I would like to start is to say everybody that always tells us that we need to look at transdisciplinary opportunities and do work and so on. You tonight had an engineer that's sitting in the computer science department promoting humanities faculty. That's actually what happened. Because from everything that I've heard nothing about EBIT, I've just heard about humanities. But honestly, I think that is what is so important, Prof. Vukosi, about the message that you brought to us. That yes, you did not tell us about all the foundational mathematics and statistics on all of those parts, which is important, and which, if it's not done through the broader team, and if it's not addressed, everything that we see here is not possible. It's not just, I've got a new word for this, and there it is, and thank you very much, it's working by magic. But also, if you do not understand the bigger challenge and problem, then all of those foundational work is useless. If you do not understand the challenge of a person that may have challenges to read and to hear and so on, and they want to communicate in their language, and it's just not possible for them. They don't care about the maths and the statistics and all of those things. They care about whether the message that they want to translate is correct or not. And I think by summarizing it like that, Prof. Vukosi and your teams, thank you for the focus on that, and the focus that it's not only about one small part of a discipline, although it supports the bigger picture, but that by doing this, we show that language carries culture and dignity and humanity, and language matters in the end. And lastly, I think that's for me always in these lectures and the work that you're doing, the part in terms of the challenge of AI. If you talk to anybody out there, no, AI will take over everything, it's going to do everything and so on. I don't think, while they are humans, and humans that are diverse, and has got diverse needs and languages and communication requirements and so on, I'm sorry, AI cannot be as diverse even as this audience, because each of us has got that inherent need and want to communicate and to be able to be heard. So with that, Prof. Vukosi, thank you very much. We really appreciated this. We appreciated what you highlighted to us. And we hope you all the best on your own journey, your own work, and also with your teams. And by doing that, making a difference locally for the rest of Africa, and actually, as you indicated, also for other countries with languages that needs much more attention. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. I would also like to thank Prof. Mosia for proceeding with tonight's officiating. We really appreciate it. Every time the EBIT team that makes all the arrangements, that makes sure that we can all be here and that everything is in place. And then please also keep a lookout on the other inaugural lectures that we've still got going. Also for the other faculties, because as you've seen tonight, you may be surprised and come to an EBIT one and then you realize, yeah, it's actually much wider than that we are doing, because we are trying to solve normal people's issues and challenges. So please join us for refreshments in the foyer area and travel safely when you go home tonight. Please stand and remain standing while the profession leaves the hall. You must enjoy the rest of the evening.